Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is James Barry. I'm a communications officer with the City of Hamilton, and I will be moderating today. Before we begin, I will ask those who are not speaking to please hold your questions and or stay on mute until you are called upon to avoid any background noise. Please be advised that this media briefing is being recorded and will be posted publicly. Media are asked to keep their questions to the topic of the two presentations the Office of the Auditor General made at today's Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee, the Fraud and Waste Annual Report and the audit covering stormwater asset management, investigation of recent sewage leaks. I would like to introduce the Office of the Auditor General spokespeople here today to answer questions. Charles Brown, Auditor General, Brigitte Minard, Deputy Auditor General. With that, Charles is going to say some brief introductory remarks. So Charles, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So today we at Audit Finance Administration Committee, we introduced two reports of ours. The first one was we released our report on the investigation into sewage spills that had been leaking into Hamilton Harbor. We engaged an external forensic engineering expert to conduct what's called an origin, cause, and risk assessment investigation. The findings of that investigation were that the sewage spills were caused by essentially three things. Drawings that were used in design and construction were incorrect. Secondly, the lack of recognition that the cross connections that were being constructed and these were not deemed a significant risk, and that happened during the construction process. And then just the complexity of the physical piping networks and the difficulty of identifying issues. The report did conclude that the Hamilton water response after the discovery of the spills was appropriate and thorough, as was the MECP order. That was reasonable, and that the ongoing response with respect to Hamilton Water and the Stantec report and recommendations were appropriate and thorough as well. So according to the expert, we retain spills of this nature are a concerning reality with many cities across Canada, given the aging water and wastewater infrastructure. And so I'm encouraged that by the actions taken and underway, but I would underscore the importance of implementing the recommendations. There were 5 recommendations in the report. The second item that we reported on, this is our 4th annual report on the activities of the Fraud and Waste Hotline. And this is activities of the hotline for the period July 2022 to June 2023. The hotline, of course, started in 2019. This is our 4th report, and it is now a permanent part of the city's reporting infrastructure. This report contains information about the volume, the nature, and disposition of all the complaints that came in that were made about suspected wrongdoing, government waste reported to us by both employees and citizens. The volume of complaints rose significantly from last year, almost 50% rise with this 4th year, to 159 complaints that we received, 48% from employees and 52% from the public. The substantiation rate on the complaints coming in was 31% this year, very consistent with last year's 32%. The amount of loss or waste we identified was $132,000, bringing the cumulative total of loss or waste since inception of the hotline to $1,287,000. We launched 13 investigations and substantiated the allegations of 44 separate reports or complaints of fraud or waste. As in past years, I have made commentary on the themes that we've seen in our investigations this year. Most prominent among those are the emerging issues of false benefit claims, continuing challenges with conflicts of interest, a need to improve city practices in contract management and oversight, and the continuing exposure to cyber fraud through email scams. The report contains some brief examples. We call them abstracts or summaries of the allegations that we investigated. Some of the more significant ones that we investigated. There was a case of multiple staff having conflicts of interest with a vendor to the city, involving significant social relationships with the contractor, including receiving hospitality, having social gatherings not in a business setting, and favorable treatment given to the contractor. A plans examiner that was working for the city, where we launched an investigation after they had been charged with a breach of trust, an employee taking money under the table from a group using a sports facility. We investigated 10 employees that were that we substantiated for making false claims for health benefits. A fraud that was perpetrated against the city by someone posing as a vendor and changing the vendor's banking information, resulting in $52,000 that was owed to the vendor being diverted to the imposter's bank account. We substantiated a complaint about someone who during COVID was working full-time at the city, as well as working full-time at another city without obviously the city's knowledge. In another similar case, we found an employee doing similar work for another employer. There was a case of an employee stealing a customer's payment card, 2 reports of abuse of short-term disability benefits, and an employee that used a city corporate account at a building supply store and making personal purchases of some $1,400. And finally, there was an employee that was living in a vacant city-owned housing unit without the knowledge of management and making modifications to that unit at city expense for their own benefit. So that's a quick summary of the 2 reports we made today, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Charles. So we'll go to members of the media for questions now. I believe we just have one reporter on that will be asking questions, at Matthew Van Dodgen from the Hamilton Spectator, but quickly going to confirm with CHCH that they don't have any questions at this time. Okay, hearing nothing. And just to note, Kate Stoller is here from KX 94.7 and also listening in to the briefing today. So Matthew, please go ahead with your questions.
Well, sounds like an opportunity for one question and unlimited follow-ups. Excellent. So I guess I'll start very briefly with the fraud and waste report. I don't know how much more detail you can add to the summaries, but when we talk about the orthotics, what are we talking about there that somehow added up to $31,000 in terms of claims? I'm not too familiar with the.
Yeah, so what we're talking about there is it sounds like a real claim and is made to appear to be a legitimate claim for orthotics and compression stockings, but we determined it to be a false claim. And in that case, it involved a third party as well cooperating. So there was a collusion aspect between the employees making the claims and the medical provider also colluding with them and making the false claim and obviously depriving the city, because I don't know if you know this, but the city, the insurance company we just pay the insurance company as a city for the administration. So the actual claims are paid by the city. All claims are paid by the city. We just pay an admin fee to the service provider. So these are a loss essentially to the city.
Forgive me, was this, can we say how many claims were involved? I mean, were they asking for payment for special types of, 12 pairs of shoes, or what are we?
I can't go into that much detail, just because I can say that this isn't just like one claim each person. This was an extensive review of numerous claims. I think we went back 2 or 3 years to look at all claims. So there were a number of claims that added up to 31. Unless you know, Brigitte, what the actual number of claims that we found to be false amongst the 6 employees, but I would say there was, numerous claims within that 31,000.
So thanks, Charles, and Matt, thanks for the question. So what I will say is I don't have the exact number of claims in front of me right now, but just keep in mind that there's various entitlements across the various union groups and non-union staff in the city, and its employees have coverage and also their family members. So there were a number of, I think 6 employees involved in that one, totaling $31,000, but it's not necessarily just 6 individuals involved. It's 6 employees that have that employer-employee relationship with the city. And there are various entitlements for the compression stockings and the orthotics themselves. So with 6 people and their dependents, it can quickly add up over a few years.
Okay.
And I would add, Matthew, that these particular investigations, they did take quite a long time, but they did open our eyes to doing an audit, essentially, of the level of oversight. How protected are we with the procedures that we use to look for and guard against false claims. So we will be conducting an audit to look for those types of systemic issues that exist with the administration of this contract.
Okay. And I see in the report, and forgive me, I should have asked this question first. I see a reference in the report to an issue that had already been made public by the city, the issue that is already before the courts.
Yes.
We're going through, but I did wonder, aside from that example, were there any other issues that you've had to forward to police for investigation arising from this report?
No, we haven't forwarded any issues to the police. We're looking very carefully, obviously, at the evidence that comes forward in the course of the trial, but also we have done some work and research to better understand some of the process issues. How was this not detected and so forth? Because that's obviously of concern equally as it is the aspect of potential criminal behavior.
Okay. That said, then you reference the allegations about the employee who resigned, in one employee who resigned that included allegations of operating a Zamboni while under the influence. Was that substantiated?
Oh, those elements, we only investigated one part of that. Brigitte, go ahead. You can answer that one if you like.
Yeah, sure. So Matt, if you take a look at the, we can't get into much more detail than what is in the report. Obviously, you can reach out to HR more for the HR matters. Sorry, I'm just flipping through to find the page here. 1 second.
The way it's
okay.
phrased in the yeah.
Sorry, I've got the page. Yeah.
It's something where, Matthew, if we get multiple allegations, there are some that we will take because they're clearly within our domain of expertise and authority, like a fraud situation and dishonest conduct like that. When it strays into issues, for example, like substance abuse or harassment or discrimination, those we refer over to HR. So I can't answer that aspect of it.
Yeah, and Matthew, just building on what Charles said, our office, as noted on page 25 of 30 on Appendix A, HR notified us, and then we requested that they do the investigation because it was more in their area of expertise, and they informed us of the substantiation of the pilfered payment card, which does relate to fraud and waste. So regarding the other allegations that were made, we are unaware of what the substantiation status is because we don't need to know that as the Office of the Auditor General. So I'm sorry, I can't provide any more information on that.
That's okay. So if I did want to follow up, I should follow up with HR.
Right.
Okay. And then lastly, you mentioned the example of a city employee who was making use of a vacant unit. Is there any additional information that you can give me about that scenario? Was it an apartment? Was it a standalone townhouse?
Yeah,
Was it?
Well, as you know, we have to be circumspect about the details we release because we don't want to discuss particulars to the point where it would lead to identification of an individual. It's just protecting the confidentiality of HR matters. In this case, we gave the amount of detail that we gave simply so that, we want to be as transparent as we possibly can. But I think maybe to go further, it might jeopardize our responsibilities with respect to confidentiality. So there is further.
On that note, I would only say that there are many city-owned apartments, and I think still dozens of individual townhouses. So it seems like it would be hard to pin an identity down from that. But
yeah, I understand your point, but I think we'll stick with what we said.
Right. So bottom line, in that case, employees were terminated, but there was nothing to justify forwarding that example either on to police or any other anyone other than HR, I suppose.
In that case, I would say it's too soon to say. It just recently got resolved. There are some cases in here where we've only recently reached out to police.
Okay.
One of them is obviously the vendor issue, the imposter vendor. That's
Right.
one that has not been resolved through the police channels. We've determined what happened, but it's still being looked at by the police and being investigated by the police.
Okay. Are you able to tell me, when you say an extended period of time for the personal use of the city-owned unit, how long a period?
You're taxing my memory here. Is it a couple of years at least, or 1 or 2 years?
I would say there was various pieces of evidence relating to that. So I would say things were indicative from several months to several years, but it's our best estimate based on the evidence we were able to review.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I can't be more specific.
I think that is everything I wanted to ask about, unless you can redirect my question if you wish on this, but over on the sewer issue in particular, there was a reference by the engineer, or perhaps in your report, to the fact that the older physical maps that had errors in them that contributed to the spill, they're still in use in some fashion, or that type of map. Am I to understand from the recommendations? Is it recommended that we try and digitize those maps or move away from having to use those old physical maps, or am I misunderstanding what they've said there?
Correct. It's still a risk exposure that we have, but I think that's the intention, to get a better asset management and more coordinated. There are two aspects to it. It's the accuracy of data, but also the coordination of data, so that you have one source for all of the parties that have the issue of the stakeholders, I guess, the internal stakeholders that manage these situations.
Okay. But if I wanted a better sense of how often we still rely on, physical maps from the 1990s or 1980s, is that a question I should send to
yes.
Water and Waste?
Yeah. Yes, that would be appropriate to ask them, and possibly to what extent they've been able to move in the direction of updating and moving to a new system.
And just in the interest of time, Matthew, if you've got one question, one final question for our spokespeople here.
I think that's all I needed.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. If I know you may be following up, so just reach out to us at our media relations at hamilton.ca mailbox.